What's up, Vortex Nation? Before we jump into today's podcast, I want to thank everybody for listening to all of our podcasts and for all the comments that we get, which leads me right into our comment of the week. Now, this one comes from the Practical Rifleman in relation to our Choosing the Right Hunting Rifle Scope in 2024 podcast. This episode created the image in my head of Don Johnson in a yellow Plymouth Cuda convertible, pulling off the road on a mountainside, popping the trunk, and uncasing a classic Remington 700 with a brand new Vortex Viper HD 2-10. Then fast forward to a mule deer strapped to the hood, pulling back into town a la the Deer Hunter movie. Thanks for the podcast, boys. Well, I tell you what, all I have to say to that is, us too. I mean, it's like we are sharing the same brain. The other thing we'll be sharing is the brotherhood of owning one of these super sweet Vortex Nation podcast hoodies, which you earned by being selected as our comment of the week. And without further ado, let's start the show.
I think a lot of folks purchase a handgun for whatever reason that they purchase a handgun for. And having been also in firearm sales, I saw a lot of those handguns get purchased and then years later sold back to me. Backing up to the entire ethos of the organization, it was to encourage people buying off-shelf firearms to come out and, gain proficiency and increase proficiency with them.
Practice speed and accuracy skills.
Yeah.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Vortex Nation podcast. Today, we're going to cover the who, what, where, when, why, and how of why, which was one of what I just said before, you should shoot a USPSA match. And luckily, we have the people to give us all this information. We are joined by Mr. Ryan Muckenhirn.
Hello.
And I liked your salute there. Live long and prosper. Is that what that is? Something or other? Mork, is that Mork from Mork? Mork and Mindy? That's a
more
good
for
show.
like Penguin from Batman.
If you remember the TV
Got
show
some nerve
Mork and
damage
Mindy,
in his hand, you just can't really
comment below. And wait, hold on, I missed something, and maybe it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And Adam Maxwell.
I am Adam.
Or we may refer to him as the GM during this podcast.
You would not be wrong. I am that.
What you don't like to shout it from the rooftops, Adam? GM would stand for
Grand Master. So in USPSA competition, they have a ranking system of skill levels, roughly based on in 10 percentile increments. So it goes D, C, B, A. Master is 85% to 95%. Grand Master is 95+%. So if you're a Grand Master, you have demonstrated some consistency in being able to execute at the top 5% of the sport.
I make you go through that as if you need it. You don't, but just to it's an establishing credential.
Yep. I mean, that's what I tell a lot of the law enforcement classes I take. It's one of the things I say, like, who am I to talk about this? Where did I come by these opinions? It's a benchmark that's somewhat universally recognized in the industry. When people say, "Oh, he's a USPSA Grand Master," people know and understand what that means. So.
Can I ask a question about that, Adam? Because we talk about this kind of thing sometimes. How many rounds do you think you've loaded on your Dillon 650?
Oh wow! Like recently?
Like let's look at the life of that creature.
I know for sure I've done 30,000 in the last 12 months.
That's bananas.
And
Wait, excuse me?
Yeah. I don't like TV, Mark, like at all.
I do like some TV. Ryan, you know I like television.
And the reason I ask that is sometimes the question is begged, like, yeah, but how hard is it to do that? Well, 30,000 rounds of just 9, you say? Or
that was 40.
Oh, 40.
40, yeah.
40 even.
Yeah.
In that amount of time frame is an incomprehensible amount of ammunition. It requires concerted effort, many hours.
It's not incomprehensible. It fits on a pallet.
It does, but when you think like
very heavy pallet.
So you may recall some years ago when I ordered 93,500 bullets.
Yeah,
that's it's roughly a third of that,
yeah.
And 93,500 bullets is a lot. 30,000 bullets off of that pallet was a lot to carry into my basement.
And it's in the trap at Vortex Edge now.
Bingo. So
You already gave him back.
Yeah, it's catch and release, baby.
the reason I do say that though is like the amount of time that you have put in on the range, on the press, with your equipment is a lot.
And I would say that's even, I'll be generous, I'll say that's 20% of the time invested. I mean, most of the skills, most of the progress is in dry fire at home, and those are the hours that really add up, and that's what puts you over the top. But when you talk, people like to talk about the shooting and all that stuff. Like the shooting is confirmation of what you've done.
Sure.
The homework you've done. So.
Sure.
Interesting. Ryan, you've done a fair amount of competitive shooting
Way back
in your lifetime. Yeah, not so much as of late, but pre-podcast, we got in here. You saw Adam, so you're obviously excited. So
elated.
We have a thing.
and then we had the pistols and magazines on the table, and I saw a light in you that I have not seen in a long time.
I'll say this.
It's like when you see Darth Vader, and then like there's like the glint on his helmet. That's Anakin Skywalker, like way in the past.
Yeah.
USPSA Ryan is Anakin Skywalker. He's way back there.
So I have not shot this style of match, whether it's USPSA or 2-gun or practical tactical shotgun or multi-gun, since about 2015.
Mm-hmm.
To back that up.
But you were doing
it was probably 2017 when we did that thing at Winnequa for the YouTube. It's probably still out there.
Oh yeah,
that was probably the last.
That doesn't
time.
count though.
What
like
about
a structured match. It used to be the thing that I lived and breathed for. But what's really interesting is I was never good at it, but I was. That's a true story.
That's not true.
No, that's a pretty true story. I was never good at it.
I choose not to believe it.
And we can fill you in more of that. But it was so, for me, it was really exciting to, one, I really enjoyed the equipment, and especially the firearms. Like, that's a fascinating thing. So, like, I hit pause 2015. Not pause, stop. I ejected the VCR. The tape came out. Whereas Adam has never slowed up. Like, he's continued going. When we walked in the room today, I was expecting a smattering of equipment, which I knew my friend Adam Maxwell had, and nothing bears any semblance other than it's a pistol to what we used to shoot with and what used to be considered the pinnacle of gear achievement.
It's kind of like when you move and then you go back to that place where you moved from and you were expecting it to be the same, but everything has changed.
I get some of those guns out sometimes, and they seem very dated from what you would see.
Yeah, whereas when I touch these things, some of these guns I've never even touched before, it feels like we're in the Star Wars. Yeah.
Unrelated to anything we're talking about here right now, which oftentimes we do that on this podcast.
Roll, yeah.
But because I have both you guys here, you were talking about things that you'd done in the past. You guys should talk a little bit about that. Remember that?
I don't think we can tell that story on the podcast.
We can't?
No.
I'll tell you how Adam and I met. Because it's related to what we do here.
It's a good story.
We'll talk about it off air.
All right.
So I worked for a company that sold a lot of related things to competitive action shooting. And we were a Class 3, Class 7 manufacturer. And Adam and I are similar ages. He's a little bit older, quite a bit wiser, better looking.
We'll call it even.
Yeah. Adam was the other kid, I guess, at that time. We were pretty young, early 20s. Who was shooting on scene. And I was like, I gotta need to find out about this guy. I heard he's really good.
And it's the staff shoot too, by the way. Yeah.
So staff shoot of the match that I'm the match director of, co-match director. And I go to Adam's stage that he's running, and we'd never met. And it was a Tom Knapp memorial stage, which we threw charcoal briquettes into the air. It was a fun stage. It wasn't like there was a lot of skill involved, but it was more fun than anything. Mm-hmm. You threw a charcoal briquette into the air. This was a tactical shotgun match. And then you shot the charcoal. And the idea was he or she that could throw the most charcoal briquettes into the air and break them in the allotted time It was not
Think of-
advantageous to throw multiples.
Think
really.
of you have like 30 seconds to throw up and shoot as many as you can.
Yeah.
Okay, so it wasn't like a Tom Knapp throw 12 clays in
It
the
was-
air and bah, bah, bah.
It was an homage to some of the types of things he would do in his act. It was not the world record attempt he's most
Right.
famous for.
Gotcha.
And Adam is running that stage. I am showing up that stage to shoot through. And of course, I am doing what I do a lot of, and that's talking. And Adam is a constant and consummate professional. He's unwavering. As many years as I've known him, which is a long time now, he has never, ever broken character. If this is a ruse, he's really good at it. And he's standing at work with like clipboard in hand, pen, and he's just like staring a hole through my skull. And he finally is like, "Excuse me, do you ever shut up?" And I'm like,
Let me stop you right there. He has misremembered the story. I was up to shoot.
He does this to me too.
I was up to
was it
shoot.
that?
I was like getting ready for the standby, which we'll get to. But I'm getting ready to go, and he's back there cackling about whatever the heck it was. And I turned around with my gun in my hand, and I'm like, "Do you ever shut up?"
And I said no.
Yeah, he looked me in the eyes, and he's like, "No." And I was like, "All right then."
Sassy.
And
Yeah.
then-
Oh, it was very sassy.
and then
Did you have a blue mohawk?
Nah,
not that year.
No.
Not that year.
At that point in time, I'm like, I like that guy. He is fire.
You know what? So here's what I thought. Here's the part of the story that I thought was going to be false. Is Adam saying to somebody he doesn't know, "Do you ever shut up?" Because
That's the part I edited for TV.
Yeah. But
it was worse.
Yeah. Yep.
it was out of
Adam,
it was out of a point of passion.
I would not have thought.
I was in.
that.
He was in. I
He
was.
could have thrown unsportsmanlike at me. That would have been it.
No, I looked at him. I'm like,
I didn't know he was the match director.
I looked at him like, this guy. And pretty much from that day forward, it was like, I'm fascinated with this guy. Everything he does, everything. And that was it. That was the
It's like
genesis.
Bert and Ernie
of,
after
yeah,
that. Yeah.
like Bert.
Well,
Yeah. Which one are you?
can I be Ernie?
Okay, deal. Yeah, I am more of a Bert, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, we can sort that out later.
Sure.
So I don't have the answers to these questions. I think I like that because even though it wasn't necessarily a USPSA match, you guys met at this match.
Yeah.
Became friends.
Yep.
And look at us today. Look at all of us.
Well, USPSA is the most formal, organized version of the sport that's under the umbrella of practical action shooting. Because that sport really stems from IPSC, International Practical Shooting Confederation.
Okay.
That's the international version that you can compete the world over. The United States chapter of that is USPSA,
Which stands for
United States Practical Shooting Association. And there are several offshoots of that. Some of them have formed into their own organizations like IDPA, United Multi-Gun League, Three Gun Nation, and most recently PCSL, Practical Competition Shooting League. All very, very, very closely related to IPSC, IPSC. And so when you say USPSA, you're really talking about the formal version of action shooting, which would be like saying the Masters in golf. Like, not all golf courses are affiliated with, the U.S. Open or anything like that. I'm going to show my ignorance on golf pretty quick, but like there's the formal series, the pro series of golf, and then there are courses and clubs all over the country doing what they do. So USPSA is the most structured and sanctioned version of that sport.
it's what and you tell me it's what I hear about the most.
Mhm.
Like, to me, it's like kind of the most common.
Bob's Backyard Match
Thing
just
going
doesn't have
on.
the same zip to it.
That's true. And it also, I think, sometimes to throw the acronym USPSA out is kind of like throwing Kleenex out.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and maybe that's
Yes.
that's where
Yes.
I'm getting that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
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 So,
So people understand people understand what USPSA is. Many matches are like USPSA. Not all matches are USPSA matches.
But would it be fair to say then, at least what I'm gleaning from what you're saying here, is like people like, we'll say like at Vortex, like, oh, we're going to have a USPSA match, but it might not be a quotation mark USPSA match?
That is something that could happen. The matches that are here, I'm the match director of them. Matches that are here are official USPSA
So they are
matches.
official.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I thought. But then I was like, well, maybe we're just using kind of like the Kleenex of tissue.
During the cold time of year, because we have a primarily indoor facility here, and really the only time that anyone in action shooting wants to shoot inside is when the weather's miserable outside.
Gotcha.
So during the winter months here, we do host essentially a volunteer club that puts on a USPSA match.
Scratch that itch a little bit.
And winter's a good time. You asked about the classification stuff. Like, winter's a good time to like scratch the itch on that kind of goal. It's something that lends itself well to shooting in an indoor environment, because 3-dimensional stages become somewhat 1 or 2-dimensional inside when you can't shoot at sideburns, when all the bullets have to go straight down range.
Right.
There's a lot that you can't do, but a lot of the classifier stages lend themselves well to that type of environment. So it's also something that lends itself well to a winter series. So that's what we do a lot of in the winter months.
What do you guys like about a USPSA style match? Like what's fun about it that you're like, man, I want to do this, I want to get better at it, and I have fun doing it?
From the neophyte's perspective, I enjoy a USPSA match because, generally speaking, so for contrast, I'm going to also put like multi-gun on the table here. Multi-gun can be very involved. You can move up to hundreds of yards on a course of fire. You will be switching between 2 or 3 guns, sometimes 4 if there's a prop gun involved in the stage. There are complex puzzles that you have to solve, all under the duress of timer, your peers watching and snickering in the background. USPSA I always enjoyed because you still got the thrill and the exhilaration and the adrenaline of the timer being over your shoulder, but it was condensed and structured, and you couldn't goof up as much as you could in multi-gun because of that condensed time frame and because of the condensed space that you're working in, and a miss would be far more detrimental to you. So you really had to kind of stay sharp, and I liked the control aspect of it too.
Comparing the two that you just contrasted, for me as like essentially a non-competitive shooter, I can tell you the USPSA match sounds a lot less intimidating and like more inviting for me to be like, yeah, I'd like to try that. I
would agree. Once you get into the somewhat feral and wild world of multi-gun, start with USPSA. That's actually, I started with multi-gun, but then moved to USPSA and then moved more into multi-gun later. Mm-hmm. A little more condensed format, a little more control. You can generally see everything in front of you. Nothing necessarily comes as a surprise. I think it is more conducive for the beginner getting into structured competition shooting.
Now, that said, I could also see it being like, I'm not saying that, like a multi-gun or another, like would be, like bad, or you don't want to do, like, I could also see it being a gateway to that, but like a really great place to start.
Oh, yes.
Well, I look at it from a couple different venues. One, if I were to use the analogy of like motorcycles, you can buy a motorcycle and you can ride it on public streets anywhere you want. But if you want to do what motorcycles do at a high level, if you want to ride them fast and aggressively, that is probably something you should not do in public right-of-ways, right? That is something you should do in a controlled, closed environment. And that essentially is what all action shooting matches are for me. It's not, you can't just go to your local range and putz around on an action shooting type stage in most places, unless you're uniquely a member of a club that allows that kind of thing. So the access to essentially do kind of first person what a lot of the current generation is only really exposed to in video games. This is the place you can do that for real. Now, if I want to do that in motorcycles, for example, I race off-road motorcycles. I really only race off-road motorcycles because that is the most structured and safe environment to do that in. Traffic is one way. It's a cleared, marked course. You know, the ambulances are there. The flaggers are there. It's a controlled place to do that where everyone has somewhat agreed to a set of rules. Here's how we're going to do that. Here are the formalities of how we're going to do this safely. That's primarily the reason that I participate in matches like USPSA matches. I would contrast them a bit more with like what you encounter in law enforcement world. When law enforcement tries to do a competition, they're kind of throwing together some kind of game, competitive environment, but they haven't thought through all the rules. So if you really approach that, whatever that game is, with like I want to go hard at this and win, a lot of times you can drive a truck through their rules, and then they're like, whoa, wait, no, you can't do that. And I was like, well, why not? Well, because what I meant was this. In a structured environment like a USPSA match, we have 50 years of people, you know, nitpicking, and all of a sudden I was like, no, we have that. You have to do it this way because, and it's fair and equal for everyone. So when you step up to a stage, you know, so we're in a competitive environment. When you step up to a stage, everyone has a fair and equal chance to lay down their best performance on it. Similar to, I don't like to shoot pool in bars. Every single bar you go to across America, they have different rules for how you play 8-ball. It's the same game, but, well, no, hear that slop or hear that. If you go to a USPSA match anywhere in the country, you know exactly what to expect.
Sure.
You know the rules, you know the safety parameters, you know what kind of start positions you could possibly see, what those targets are, how they'll be scored.
And again, as you mentioned, all predetermined by a governing body, a lengthy and detailed rule book.
Yep.
And then people like match directors,
Yep.
ROs, upholding all of that. Yeah.
Yep. And then plus or comma, the other reason I really like USPSA, because as Brian said, I've been in this long enough. I got the disease pretty bad. It draws talent. So like if you really like holding the pistol in my hand and having it go off just doesn't do it for me anymore. I like playing the game, and the game is really only fun if there's somebody else there that wants to play the game too. You know, even locally here at our local club, there's 3 or 4 GMs that can show up on any given Sunday, and like you got your hands full, even though it's not a major match. So, you know, the competitive wise, it also brings nerds like us together into one place at one time that we can rock out. Is the other reason that I really like USPSA matches. So
I like it. You know, generally I don't like a lot of rules, but I do like what you're talking about, that like everybody knows what's going on. You can count on those things being the case, you know, those and although there's like a lot of, in my opinion, as a person who would be new to this, like there's a lot to know. There's protocols, safety protocols, like you said, the rules, but once you know them, there's also comfort in that at the same time.
Yeah. And that's really what I get out of them is comfort. To contrast, when I work with a group of law enforcement, we got to start at the very beginning, like, hey, I've trained all over the country with all kinds of people who fancy themselves firearms professionals. Gun safety means different things to different people. So we have to square, like, today, here's what it means. And when you're at a host range, they have to say, okay, well, here's when you show up to a USPSA match, everyone, if you already are participating in the sport, everyone understands. So really the only people who are getting educated on the safety and the protocols are people who are new to it. And you'll find that, by and large, we as a group want more people in our group. So we are more than happy to explain it to you. But because we are playing games with real bullets, like there are certain hard and fast rules that we have to hold to maintain the integrity of the safety of our sport. So
absolutely. No, that makes sense. There are multiple divisions of USPSA. Can you run through some of those?
Yes. So the divisions would get into types of equipment, and the sport really wants a consumer to be able to come and play the game with any sort of common handgun that they may purchase. So short of, pistol braced ARs, and there's nothing saying you can't shoot a Desert Eagle, but it's not terribly practical. But like within the scope of, common practical revolvers and pistols, they want a place for you. They want you to come and play the game. At the same time, from the competitive standpoint of the game, equipment is not created equal. So they try to divide out a little bit and, try and make tribes of people who are playing the game in the same way. One, it makes it kind of would happen anyway, because like at some of the outlaw matches that Ryan and I are referencing, people will say, yeah, we know that Iron Man has a heavy metal division, but we're all going to wear plate carriers with armor. So it's like, yeah, you won heavy, but did you wear a plate carrier? And so there's these little groups that like had like a sub match within a match, making it harder, or they were trying to challenge it in this way. Or in USPSA, there's Discord groups that are like, all right, tonight we're all shooting carry guns. So like, whatever division you normally shoot, a bunch of us are showing up with our carry guns. If you want to rock out with your carry gun out and like have somewhat comparable heat against you, tonight's the night we're doing carry guns. So this kind of thing would happen anyway. So they tried to formalize segments of the divisions without going too deep into the whole. Open is open. So there's one division called open. This would be representative of an open pistol. There are very few restrictions to what you can do on an open pistol. Really, it has to be 9mm or larger. And then you can have a magazine that's up to 140 millimeters in length. Without getting too deep into the weeds, the rest of it's fair game. All right? So pretty much it's the catch-all division, top fuel, drag racing. It's the race gun division.
So red dots, compensators on the muzzles.
Compensators, exotic calibers. You'll still see 38 Super Comp. You'll see a caliber that's not commercially available, 9mm major. You'll see exotic stuff in open division. Stepping back from that, there's a division called limited. These were the two original divisions. Limited is essentially open, but they don't allow optics. They don't allow compensators or ports on the barrel. And then they shortened the magazine to only 140 millimeters. So you can essentially stuff as many bullets in here as you want as long as the magazine is less than 140 millimeters.
Gotcha.
So limited division. For a long time, those were the only two divisions. And then a guy named Bill Clinton was elected and instigated the assault weapons ban. So there was a time where this equipment was illegal to purchase. So they made limited 10, which is essentially limited, but you can only load 10 rounds in the gun. Okay, that went on for a while, a more accessible division, because for a while you just couldn't buy these, or you couldn't buy them at any sane price.
Is that still a thing?
No.
Or that's kind of gone away? Yeah.
Well, they're on the books and they never really went away.
Okay.
Kind of like most laws, they just kind of go on. And,
can we back up? Did we say 170 was the mag length for open?
Yes, 170.
Okay, 170.
So then there's limited 10, which is essentially limited, but you can only load 10 rounds into your gun. Then this, I think the sport really started getting popular. We're up in about the mid 90s, early 2000s here. And then there became an interest in more practical competition. Like this is a limited gun here. If you're watching on YouTube, this one's made by Atlas Gunworks. But essentially it's a 2011. It weighs, 50 ounces I haven't weighed it in a long time, but it's a heavy gun. It shoots an obscure caliber, at the time. People were like, yeah, but I can't show up with my Glock and have any chance against that guy. It's not necessarily true, but like the perception is there. Like I have to make this huge investment to even play the game properly. So they started making other divisions. One of the first ones they did was production. So production would be essentially your Glock pistol. So they were going after double and single action service pistols. Very restricted on any modifications that you could do to it without going too deep in the weeds. Essentially, you couldn't do very much to them. You had to use a standard capacity magazine, and then you were only allowed to load 10 rounds into the magazine at the time. That recently changed to 15. But essentially, it's a stock class, that you can come to the match with a gun that's commercially available. You can load it with a amount of ammunition that gun holds, and use fairly contemporary gear. Around about that time, this is still in the era when 1911s were very popular. They did single stack division. So single stack is around specifically in 1911. And then it has to be a bushing barrel 1911. And then
it's so funny.
We'll get into major and minor later, but if you shoot major, you can only load 8 rounds. If you shoot minor, you can load 10. So you have a little bit of a strategy question there. But they did, a single stack for 1911 style pistols. And then they did revolver for obviously revolvers. More recently, they've introduced, PCC, so there was an interest in developing like a pistol caliber carbine because those carbines shoot bullets that are safe to shoot all the USPSA targets with, so it was seen as like broadening the format. And then there's a division called carry optics, which is really what this one would be. Carry optics was originally production, but it allowed optics. I'll spare you the long story. To make it more popular, they essentially made it limited with optics. So modification restricted. You can have an optic, and then you can have a 140 millimeter magazine.
And this should also be noted. Like when you look at these divisions, they do tie into commercially available firearms.
Mm-hmm.
So the limb optics or production optics, whatever you want to call it. Like we 2 examples you have there. You got a Shadow 2 and a CZ Smith & Wesson M&P on the table.
Yep.
Both of these pistols from the factory come ready to accept an optic, right? So the again, Adam had mentioned earlier, like for the individual interested in the sport, there doesn't need to be a trip down to the custom 2011 Smith to make this a functional system for you. This is something you could buy off the shelf at your local retailer, slap your favorite optic on there, and then come and compete. And backing up to the entire ethos of the organization, it was to encourage people buying off-shelf firearms to come out and gain proficiency and increase proficiency with them.
Practice speed and accuracy skills.
Yeah. And so that's what I think is really cool out of it. When I had stopped shooting it, there was just production. Well, it was revolver production, limb 10, limb, and open. That was all that was available. And so, if somebody showed up, even I think for a time when the Glock MOS system was out, and certainly when the M&P Core was out, because I think the Core predates the MOS by a good number of years.
Yep.
To slap a red dot on your commercially available M&P Core, which is no different than an M&P, just with an optics cut, it moved you immediately into open.
Yes.
And then you would be very likely disadvantaged to the shooter who is running a race tuned 2011 with a 27 round magazine.
Yeah. And more importantly, disenfranchised.
Sure.
It's like being a lightweight fighter, but being forced to fight a heavyweight guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So they create some of these divisions, encouraging participation and also niche. I mean, each division kind of has its own flavor and strategy to it. But to give you an idea, I believe the number is something like 40% of the membership participates in carry optics.
Sure.
So an overwhelming majority shoot the kind of contemporary pistols with a red dot class. I think the next most popular is limited. The guns are a little bit more attainable. And traditionally, that was one of the bigger divisions, so a lot of people legacy are staying in that, and then open. Between those 3, that's most of the participation in the sport.
So you, as somebody who's been involved with the organization for as long as I've known you, which is coming up on 15 years now, that has not always been the case. Like
No.
Right. It used to be entrenched one direction, and now has definitely like paradigm shift, pendulum swing.
Yeah. I would say you used to see, and this wasn't even that long ago, you used to see a pretty even production division was pretty well represented.
Yeah.
Single stack was pretty well represented. A lot of people would shoot open, and then a few rich guys would shoot open. Or excuse me, a lot of people would shoot limited, and a few rich guys would shoot open.
Sure.
That's basically how it was. Very recent, I would say within the last 3 years, when they changed the carry optics rules to allow more bullets, so they went from restricting you to 10 rounds or 15 rounds or whatever it was to allowing you to have essentially 23 rounds, it became a more interesting division for a lot of people, and that a lot of people jettisoned out of production, out of single stack. They, those people are either getting older and they wanted to use red dots, or the younger generation just didn't relate with those guns, and they went straight to carry optics. Carry optics specifically segregates out single action pistols like 2011s, so that's where limited optics recently got introduced. Limited optics, carry optics are very similar divisions, and I see in a short time, vast majority of people are going to be in one of those two divisions if they aren't consolidated together.
Sure.
Interesting. I mean, the pistols that Ryan was referencing early on in this podcast, we've seen an evolution there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that evolution is just like what's common. And I feel like right now, if you own a pistol, it's likely a carry gun or could be a carry gun, and it likely has an optic on it. And to me, that's like a natural funnel for a lot of people, for a place for a lot of people to end up. And then you also have the practical side of it is I'm practicing at a high level the gun that I may have to use to defend my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, vast majority, even though there are some pretty exotic equipment divisions, vast majority of the people you see, certainly at the local level, even at the regional and area level, are shooting guns that you could readily buy off the shelf and would recognize as contemporary basic guns.
And they're nice guns, too.
They are. Like, you can get some really nice guns for not a whole lot of money these days. And a lot of them come pretty race ready. Like a CZ Shadow 2 is ready to go out of the box. Some guys, people will do different things to them because it's a gear-oriented sport, so gadgety people, they just can't help themselves. But the gun itself is ready out of the box, where if you go back to the 80s, if you bought a standard Colt 1911, it was not match ready. It needed sights. It needed triggers. None of the mags worked. Probably safety and there was all kinds of stuff you had to do. Like, it was common practice to buy a box stock Colt and send it to a gunsmith to have it gamed out. The industry noticed that. Now, pretty much the guns you buy out of the box, and the organization itself is also, they go to SHOT Show too. They're watching the trends, and they're like, okay, are we going to embrace this or not? And so they're trying to embrace commonly available guns for vast majority of the sport.
What we've talked a lot about the various types of guns. What other equipment is a person going to need if they're going to do a USPSA match?
A belt. This is, so when you're going to start shooting, pick the gun you have or pick a gun, and don't think about guns for a while. I know it's very hard.
It's kind of the fun part.
But don't think about guns for a while. Like the next like really the most important piece of gear that's really going to have you have fun in the sport is a belt. Because you normally have to start from a draw. So you need a holster and a belt that's a good basis to draw from quickly. A lot of stages are won and lost in a draw, or you could certainly lose a stage in a draw. And then you usually have to carry some amount of ammunition with you, and reloads. It's a timed sport. Reloads are a timed scored activity, essentially. So you need to be able to execute one, if not more, consistent timed reloads. And that starts with a belt. This is the least sexy piece of gear to buy, but this is dollar for dollar the best investment you can make. Once you decide that this is something you want to do for a while, or at least interested in pursuing, investing in a two-piece competition belt is the next piece. And two-piece, I mean, there's a belt. It's a Velcro-based system, so you have essentially a belt that is this is the loop
Yes.
side.
Yes.
So this is what you thread through your belt loops on your pants, and by rules, you have to have pants to wear belt loops. This is one of the ways we get around cheaters. All right, so you have to have a belt
wait, well, how would you cheat?
They don't mount it to their waist.
Yeah.
The closer you get the ammunition to where you're shooting it, the faster it is to grab. So your belt has to go through at least two belt loops.
Where else would you put a belt?
This is a thing. They make leggings for ladies, and it's actually a thing. They have to make leggings with belt loops on them.
My goodness.
So that they can legally wear
You should shoot in some of those.
Don't threaten me with a good time. Like, I work out.
I think you could pull that off.
I'm coming back to USPSA.
I'm fat up top, but I'm pretty good down there, so maybe I could pull that off. But so you wear an inner belt. This is what holds up your pants like you would traditionally think of a belt that you wear every day. This particular one, it actually doubles as a carry belt, but it's elastic in the back. So this one gives you some tension. And then the actual belt that holds all your stuff has the hook part of the elastic on it. That attaches to the outside. That does a couple things for you. This belt is really rigid and stiff. You can't hold this belt. I mean, the whole thing, it supports its own weight. So it's very rigid, so it can hold a lot of weight. So we have a pistol that may weigh up to or more than 2 pounds. We have 1 to 2 magazines typically holding 23 rounds of 9mm. So these weigh a lot. If you're 3-4 of these, it's a lot of weight. So it supports the weight. And then also, not going through your belt loops, you can hard mount all this stuff into a position where you want it. You don't have to thread it through and then put all this stuff on. And then time to time, when you put this on and off, the stuff is in the same place. If you had to individually thread it every time, if you wear Levi's one day and then you wear Wranglers the other day, they put their belt loops in different places. You can't always put your stuff in the right place. So an outer belt lets you put all the equipment where you want it. It's hard mounted there, and then it has enough rigidity to support it all. That's a big investment right there.
You said that was the least sexy piece of gear. I remember when I think you and I got our ELS belts at the same time. Because I was running, I think, a CR Speed previous to that, and then I went to ELS. And that was way cooler than when I got, like, a cool pistol.
Oh, yeah.
I felt, when I clipped that thing on for the first time and I put my 17L in the holster, I felt like, I don't know, they just gave me a lightsaber or something the first time, man. I still feel cool when I put it on.
Well, like, I was doing retail gun sales for a while before I came to Vortex, and we'll say a pretty affluent suburb in a major metropolitan area. And so we would have people come in that wanted to get into this sport. It's even 3-gun at the time.
Yeah.
They had no problem dropping $3,000 on a rifle. This is already dated prices, all right? They had no problem dropping $3,000 on a rifle. They had no problem buying a 2011 right out the go. Those were about $3,000 at the time. They had no problem buying a shotgun, buying all the accessories, sending it to the gunsmith to have all that installed. And they're like, all right, what else do I need? Like, you need a belt. And the belt at the time, with all the stuff that I would sell them, was about $300 to have, like, to be the last belt that you would buy and shoot the pro level. And that would be the line in the sand. They're like, what? $300 for a belt? Yeah, man. Now, what made
it was
that,
like the rifle scope rings of
they had it's exactly like, they bought a razor scope and then they put it in hunter rings. It's like, what did you
I've got a $3,000 rifle, $1,000 plus scope.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, the belts themselves, we'll call it $100. The holster and the hanger that it goes on, call it another $100. And then I would say pouches, we'll just keep the trend going. It's about another $100 to get all the good stuff. Just to give you a number that will give you an expectation of what you should be okay with spending.
Now,
you can do it for more, you can do it for less, but
I've heard a few people say, like, hey, when, like, let's say you're going to your first match or you're just getting to it or you think you might be interested to, like, not, I mean, you can do whatever you want if you got the coin.
Don't buy this at first.
Okay, well, so that was my question was, is this the one thing that you're going to, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to buy the craziest race gun. You don't have to buy but, like, you're going to need a good belt. Like, there's some other options?
So, like, you're going to go to your first couple matches, and you're going to see you're going to see people that have guns probably look different than yours. You're going to see all this stuff, and people want to buy different guns, different optics, different. The first thing, after you go to a few matches and you decide that this is something you like and want to do more of, that's the first money you should. This is the second round of spending.
Okay.
If you're really going to look at staying in the sport or doing it at some level, you will increase your enjoyment. Buy a belt before you upgrade anything on your gun. buy a belt before you get new grips, get a different trigger, get a different optic, get a different mags, get different mag pouches. Like this is the next thing to buy.
What would you do in place of this to start out then?
Most people have a holster of some kind, even your concealed carry holster. I mean, you can show up with your concealed carry gear.
And that's relatively new, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being able to draw from concealment inside the waistband?
Not inside the waistband, but as
I think appendix is.
As appendix
what it is.
became very
Yes,
popular because the rules used to say the holster had to be behind your point of your hip
Sure.
or at the point of your hip, which ruled out appendix. Appendix is now legal. So you can show up with whatever holster you have. There's a couple parameters. Mainly it has to encase the trigger guard, which is the safety thing. And then you have to be able to holster it with one hand without flagging yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll want some kind of mag pouch to facilitate these reloads. You could like go out of a pocket or something like that. But most of the time, the holster and the magazine pouches you already have are at least enough for you to experience the game and try it.
Sure.
Gotcha.
Once you're like, yes, this is something I want to do, then start looking at this is money you want to prioritize spending before you do anything else.
Looking at your belt, how much time do you think you've spent on locating the different components of it and their angles?
Well, that depends entirely upon how stubborn you are. Because everybody thinks they're like, oh, well, I think I want it here. And so I've spent 10 years. But if you're smart, you look at like the people who do well and where they put their stuff, it's pretty consistent where it is.
Interesting. Okay.
So, the angle that the holster, most people are running some kind of drop and offset. So the actual gun sits, the trigger guard of the gun sits below the belt, which works out to be conveniently about the length of what your arm is extended. So you don't have to be up, you're not working up into your armpit when you draw. If you drop and offset it a little bit, it kind of puts your hand where you want to be to draw. But then they'll work around with different angles. Pretty much anything besides straight up and down, you're kind of wasting your time. People do it, but...
And what you're talking about is the pistols.
Yeah, the pistols
either
canted.
Forward cant or rearward cant.
Yep, there's advocates for both, and maybe even subtly so one way or the other, but like extreme cants forward and backwards. Like a lot of people when they first try to shoot open, they'll let you cant it however you want. So they'll have the thing practically horizontal sitting in the thing. And that's one of those, like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like, it's not necessarily faster. So if you look at where people's holsters are, that's pretty consistent. If you look at where people's magazine pouches are, also pretty consistent. And then as far as angles on the magazine pouches, the goal, this may vary person to person, but the ultimate goal is that your hand falls on a magazine with your, so that you can just grab it and pull it out. You don't have to turn your hand, bend your wrist to get at it. And then once you pull it out, you don't want to have to turn it. Like one of the things we can absolutely say is bullets forward is what you want to do when you put your magazine in a pouch. Bullets forward. A lot of people, when they start, mark of a rank amateur is when they put them in backwards and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna pull it out and then turn it around like this. Okay, that turn cost you 0.2 of a second, and this is a game that's 1 in 500ths of a second. All right, so that's one of the first ones you point out to new people is like, hey, point all your magazines forward. And then in an orientation so that as you sweep around your belt line, you just grab it out of there with a straight wrist and you can present it to the gun.
And is your order of operations closest to...
Yep. Start in the front. The basic technique is, I come to the center line of my belt and I start working around, and then the first mag that I come to, that's the one that gets pulled out. If I go back there again, same thing until you find another one, until you find another one, until they're all gone. Sometimes, if you shoot single stack, but yeah. So there's no magic, especially if you kind of observe and take good advice. That's pretty established, but it's also unique. Like every every belt is unique. Like if you show up to a match without your belt, I do this all the time. Well, not all the time, but it has happened. Get to a match, I grabbed my range bag, I have my gun, my ammo, and my magazines. I don't have my belt. There aren't very many things that will turn you around and send you home without shooting a match, like you not wanting to shoot. Not having a belt is one of them, because you can borrow somebody else's gun. People will loan you, or it's not really a loan because you're not going to return it, but people will float you some ammo. People will, loan you mags, loan you pouches, all kinds of stuff. But I mean, a belt is so unique because all of our waist sizes are different, and then this is it's very individualized, but the actual line items and check boxes are pretty standardized as to what they are. They're just uniquely. It's like a pair of shoes. Like you can't borrow shoes from somebody. Everybody's
not
different.
well.
Not well. On this belt, we've talked about the holster. During the match, there's some rules that go with how you store your pistol.
Mm-hmm.
What's going on there?
So that's actually pretty simple. Basically, common practice is most people, because the range is a cold range, which I think we're getting to in your notes, but so it's a cold range. So essentially there's a designated area where you can don your pistol. And for the most part, you can either go about the match with your pistol in the holster, so you can just walk around with this rig and the pistol in it wherever you want. You're not allowed to pull it out. You're only allowed to pull it out in the designated safety area or with a range officer when it's your turn to shoot. So for the most part, most people will go to the safety table when they first arrive, and they will gun up, which means they take it out of their bag, put it in their holster. And then for the most part, that's another reason why this is something you want to invest in, because you pretty much live in this for the duration of the match.
Gotcha.
For that day. So
which could be long format matches all day.
Yeah.
Starting in the morning, done in the evening, or if you're at like a little weekly league night, maybe a couple hours long.
Yeah, weekly, like local league night stuff can go a couple hours. A weekend club match, I would say you're looking at maybe 4 or 5 hours, right away, like kind of just after sunrise time to early afternoon. And then larger major events, they might be an all-day thing. And then, area nationals, championships, those are 2 and 3 day events. So.
Wow. When I was doing my USPSA pre-podcast research, another piece of equipment some folks were talking about was a pistol rug.
Okay. What about it?
They're just like, you might want to get one of these. Do you have one, Adam? Do you use it?
Every American that has a pistol has one of these. A pistol rug is just a pistol case.
Look at that. Canvas.
Yeah, this is old school. Hashtag Cabela's. I mean, it's just a soft pistol case that you put a pistol in. So I would say most people that go to the range with pistols have these. If you bought the pistol and it came in a box, you could show. There's no reason you can't show up with the standard Glock or M&P box and use that. But most people, after some amount of time, they get some kind of pistol case. Or I would say, as you participate in the sport for a while, you end up with a shooting bag. If you invest in a shooting bag, the bags themselves have slots in them that the pistols go in. So
okay,
for the YouTube viewers, like it's like a duffel bag, and then there's actually a pouch in there that you can put it in. Or sometimes they have the bags come apart, because what they don't want you, some ranges are pedantic about, they want you to separate the ammo from where the guns are. So to take this to the safety table without the ammo, they make it so you can separate the ammo from the two. But a lot of shooting bags either have rugs as part of them, like it comes with it and it fits in a special pouch, or there's actually a part of the bag that serves as a pistol case.
Gotcha. Man, that's some old school Cabela's right there.
It is old school Cabela's.
I'm looking at all these things.
I just threw a gun in there to bring it here, actually.
I'm looking at all these things, and I'm remembering when I had started getting into this around 2009, 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14.
Mm-hmm.
And like every one of these gear items, I can remember getting my good one. and being like, I have arrived. Like
My problem is like I a lot of this stuff ends up on prize tables if you go to the major events.
Yeah.
And so I had a thing. I'm a sucker for a good.
Good range bag?
I must be a chick because like it's akin to a purse,
Oh,
right?
good
Like,
range bag, man.
Oh man, that's a good range bag. I have a rule now. Like I'm not allowed to grab range bags because I have too many of them.
But they're so useful.
I know. Now I have one for every sport, almost every division.
Yep.
Like they're kind of pre-packed with all this stuff.
Everybody's thinking
Yeah.
grab a gun. That's fine. You can think that. But what you really, really want to grab is that really good range bag.
You're not
Once the guns are gone.
you're not crazy, because I have found that, like, at least, and I'd like to do more, but I kind of have a Western hunting backpack kit set up with a backpack, and then I also have my whitetail backpack, and it's nice for me to
Grab and go.
just grab and go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This one's got a certain set of kit. This one's got a certain set of kit.
Yep.
You're not like, oh, I want to use this, so I'm bringing this flashlight over. We were talking about this in a different podcast. It's just nice. Yeah, grab and go.
As close to the door as my girlfriend will allow, I have ready to go a USPSA bag, a 3-gun bag, a practice bag, and then the random stuff I'm doing for work and need to go to the range bag. Like, they're all on a shelf. They all have hearing protection in them. They all have, all the stuff. And so, yeah, I just take the gun out of the safe, put it in the bag, and it's pretty much, filled with ammo and gun, and it's ready to go.
Well, and you're not. It's saving you time. Otherwise, you'd be like, well, I got to go. Now I got to spend the time to get ready for this. You're like, nope, I can just grab this and.
Well, and I'm a simple creature. Like, I forget stuff.
Yes.
So, like, I don't.
And I'm saying yes for me, actually.
Right? It's like Ear Pro's the biggest one. Like, I have enough Ear Pro stashed around now that I don't think about Ear Pro, but I would show up to the range like, oh, man, I don't have.
Anybody got any foamies?
Anybody got any foamies? Then they're like, no.
Another good piece of kit to mention, Ear Pro and Eye Pro. So, hearing protection, eye protection.
Yep.
Prerequisite.
Prerequisite. Yep. Not expensive. Doesn't have to be super fancy.
Yeah. I mean, look at the Vortex line that just came out. That would be a prime example of quality, but not super fancy. Like, that would be all of those would be pieces that I would buy and I would take good care of.
Right.
Whereas, like the cheaper stuff, like you get free safety glasses all over the place. They're quasi disposable. You probably, those will get you by. You probably won't ultimately be happy with them. So a lot of shooters will invest in a good pair of eye protection. If you need a prescription, a lot of people invest in that kind of stuff. Or you have a good ones and then wear contacts with it. But good eye protection is another kind of not sexy thing that a lot of people invest in because you're going to spend a lot of time in it. And poor quality stuff does perform not as well. I mean, it fogs up. It gets glare, all that type of stuff. So eye protection is underrated, but you are required to have it, and it is directly influences the kind of experience you have.
For sure. And I was, when I mentioned it doesn't have to be with any of this stuff, whether it's what we're talking about today or hunting, like you can go as deep down the rabbit hole as you want and spend as much, coin as you want. But I agree with you. It's one of those things, oftentimes, the more you spend, and the better quality item you do get.
I will say this though, like at most ranges, I think eye protection is checking a box. Okay. Well, in USPSA, one of the things we shoot is steel targets. There is absolutely jackets and spall that comes back after that stuff. It doesn't hit you all the time. It doesn't, it doesn't even break the skin most of the time, but these are your eyes. Okay. So there is stuff, there's brass ejecting out of guns, and then there is spall off of steel targets. It's not Safety Sally that's making you wear the eye pro. It is 100% something you want on. And your gas station sunglasses, like, oh, I have glasses on. They probably, depending on that particular club or who those officials are, like if you have glasses on, people probably aren't going to say anything. But like with side protection, like wraparound, if you're not square to the range, if you're standing talking to somebody and stuff comes in from the side, like it is important to have legit wraparound eye protection when you're on a USPSA range.
For sure. Ryan, you and I talk about calibers and cartridges a fair amount on the podcast. What are we seeing in USPSA?
9mm.
You say that so boringly.
It is. It's horribly boring. But these darn kids these days, that's all they want to shoot.
Part of it's accessibility.
So back it up.
What else might you want to, or are there? Like you talk about heavy metal, and stuff like that. Are there divisions like that?
So we're playing a game, and the way hit factor scoring goes in most of the legacy divisions, there's major and minor. So we'll say there's 3 scoring zones on the target. A zone is worth 5 points, no matter what. In major, the C zone is worth 4 points. The D zone is worth 2 points.
And what constitutes major?
I'll get there. In minor, A is 5, C is 3, D is 1. And your score is essentially the number of points you accrue by the time it took you to get them. So major and minor scoring is determined based off of your bullet weight times the velocity. Bullet weight times velocity has to be over 165,000 to be major. That is essentially, it's based around a production 45 ACP in the 80s. All right, so it's intended to be box stock 45. 40 also is in that neighborhood. Usually factory ammo is plenty hot to make that. Minor, that same function of bullet weight times velocity has to be over 125,000. So part of the core principles of the sport, like when they define what the sport is, they say speed, accuracy, power. The way they test power, or the way that they tried to level the playing fields, because at the time we had 45 caliber guns going up against 9mm guns. Guys with 9mm guns had more capacity, less recoil. How do we level that with guys shooting more power, less capacity? And then at the time, this was even before a lot of the FBI stuff around, like there was still knockdown power. That was something they still wrote about in I don't know, maybe they still write about it in magazines. But like people would legit buy 40s and 45s because they thought like it would be more terminal effect. So it was a more manly defensive caliber, and so they wanted to somehow reward that if you were shooting a harder gun to shoot, but also it also is the floor for people who are hand loading, to make people who are hand loading at least competitive with people who are buying factory ammo. So guys like Ryan and I who are rolling our own ammo, we could load some. There's all kinds of names for it, but we could load some like powder puff stuff that would cycle the gun,
sure,
but would not hit with any authority. So
like barely, like just enough to knock a steel plate down,
or maybe not even. So like this is how they get people on a level playing field so that you don't have to hand load. Like what's a rifle sport that you have to load? Like F class, like in F class, you can't just buy box ammunition and be competitive.
Correct, you'd be wildly disadvantaged.
Right. So they're trying to level the playing field with people who are hand loading with people who are buying box stock ammunition.
Yeah.
So in some of the more traditional divisions, there's major and minor. However, as much as they tried to run it down the center and like make it even, it's going to fall one way or the other, and the advantage kind of fell towards major. So in a division where major and minor are recognized, it's generally considered to be a competitive advantage to shoot major because you get more points per hit, even though you can't necessarily carry as much ammo. So in open, limited, Lim 10, somewhat debatable in single stack, but for the most part in single stack, it is considered an advantage to shoot major, and that is where you will see 38 Super, 9 Major, 40 Smith & Wesson, 45 ACP. I think the only thing holding 40 Smith & Wesson in the commercial market is probably USPSA, because like those are the only people who choose to shoot 40 anymore, unless like a department is telling them to.
Gosh, it just wasn't that many years ago that 40 it was so hot.
Now it's like I will pick up all the 40 brass I can get because it's getting more and more rare. It's very rare. Now, also in the meantime, some of these other divisions, one of the ways they made them attainable is they did not recognize major power factor. So there is no major in production.
Yep.
Production class has no major. Carry optics has no major.
Okay.
Revolver has major minor. They tipped the capacity division rules in favor of minor. So in those divisions, it's either there's no major, or those are also the divisions that people are drawn to. So people are electing to shoot divisions that don't recognize major.
Right.
So by and large, you're seeing people shoot. I mean, there's nothing that says you can't shoot 40.
But there would be, at least from a scoring perspective, there's no advantage to shooting that in that division.
Right. There's no advantage, or there might even be a handicap.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
Like I could load, I love me some 45 minor.
Yeah.
Like I like to load like some real bunny fart 45s. But only 8 of them fit in this magazine. If I'm shooting up against guys shooting minor in single stack, they can have 10 in here. They can have 2 more bullets per magazine than me. That is a distinct advantage. So by and large, the most popular divisions currently are divisions that don't actively incentivize using larger or spicier calibers. So by and large, you see 9mm, we'll say more than 80% of the field at the local level.
I have a question.
9mm.
Your single stack gun there, that is chambered in 10 light.
This particular one is 40 Smith & Wesson.
What
10 light.
That's what it was. Why 40 in that gun?
So this is some of the nuance of the game that dorks like me find interesting. So single stack is unique. Single stack allows major and minor, and if you select one or the other, you get a different capacity advantage. So if you shoot major, you're only allowed to load 8 rounds, squaring you with all 45 guys. If you shoot minor, you're allowed to have 10. That's pretty much what 9mm will do. The reason that 40 is an interesting thing in that particular division, it's mostly popular because limited shooters were shooting 40 and they already had a load, so they just had a gun made in 40 to shoot. When the single stack championship was a thing, people would just switch to single stack to shoot that match, and then they'd switch back. But from a strategy standpoint, in 40, due to the dimensions of the cartridge, you can, with special magazines, you can get a mag that fits in the box. That's a regulation thing. This gun can only be big enough to a certain size. You can get mags that fit in the box that you could load 10 rounds of 40 in. And so a guy could show up to a match and look at all the stages and decide before registration if he was going to declare major or minor. And he could play either side of the fence. So he would be looking at stages and asking himself, is having 10 rounds going to get me around a standing reload? So you'd be in an array and you wouldn't have enough bullets to get through. You'd be standing there doing a reload instead of having enough to shoot through and then start moving again while you're reloaded. Or what I actually got this straight from the man himself, Rob Latham. I was like, because I asked him, I was like, how many standing reloads? Because that's really what you hear is, all right, standing reloads. I'm like, Rob, how many standing reloads does it have to be before you say, yeah, minor's the one? And he was like, it doesn't have anything to do with that. Oh, what? The Instagram said, he's like, no. If there's lots of partials and no-shoots, so not all the targets are wide open torso targets. They'll have hardcover, so they'll start to reduce the amount of scoring zone available.
Right.
Or they will park a penalty target or a no-shoot in the proximity. So now to get an alpha, you're getting really close to either a miss or a penalty. So that kind of opens up the temptation towards shooting in the lower point zones. If a match has a lot of partials and no-shoots to where more of your points are going to be in the Charlie zone, they said shoot major because your Charlies are worth 4 points instead of 3 points. But if that match director really set up a match that has a lot of wide open targets, he's like, go minor so you have more capacity. You have more makeup shots. You have a little bit more flexibility. But it was really the strategy around how many partials, no shoots, and or how the reloads were going to work out on that particular match. So guys would have 40 single stack guns. They would have major and minor ammo in the car. And then before the match start, you have to declare what you are, but they could make that decision on game day. So in the niche market of USPSA, there are a lot of 40 single stack guns. They're hard to find really anywhere else. They are miserable to own, and I would not recommend it to anybody. The only thing I don't like about this gun is that it's stainless and it's in 40.
Other than that, it's really cool.
I wish I had a 45 with an adjustable rear sight. Because
other than its defining attributes.
Yeah, 45 is nicer to shoot. It feeds better. The mags work better. All that stuff. But in the niche of after that long stint of time I spent with this gun, I was like, man, I really wish it was a 45 because I like 45 better. But
it never ceases to amaze me. Early on, I think we mentioned, or you've mentioned the word, this is a game, right?
Yeah,
it's 100% a game.
It's always astounding to me how the lengths people will go to game the system and find every little. I mean, if there's a crack, they will exploit it.
We're here to play a game.
And maybe to make a long story short for the person who just listened to all that, it sounds like 9. Yeah. Like
so
if you
can shoot more of it per dollar.
If you're just getting started,
just buy 9.
So
you'll know when it's time to buy something else.
And maybe your whole USPSA journey would be 9.
I think there's lots of people that is going to be their entire USPSA career.
I knew that I wasn't going to invest the time and money into becoming a really good USPSA shooter and start playing the class game. Like, I have a limited gun. I actually have 2 of them, both chambered in 40. Neither have been fired. I've never pulled the trigger on them one time. They've never had a loaded magazine inserted in them. It came to me, I suppose, when I started shooting more multi-gun, where it's like, that's what I really enjoyed, but I could shoot a USPSA league weekly and shoot monthly USPSA matches at a local club with guys like Adam and like the regular Joes, so to speak, and like enjoy myself, stay sharp with the pistol because it was my weakest tool. That I said, I'm just going to shoot 9mm, and I'll take the minor penalty because I'm not here for score. I'm not going to win necessarily. I just need to remember how my pistol works good. And so I conceded completely and shot limited minor when I would shoot USPSA, or I would shoot just production, and stuck with 9. And it was fine. I had 1 gun to load for. I was shooting my 3-gun loads, which are anemically powerful. That was okay. That was totally fine. That was great. 9mm. Play ball.
It always treats you right.
It does.
Yeah. Well, when it's time to shoot something else, you'll know. You won't need to listen to a podcast and have some guys recommend it. Like, you'll be like, oh, I want to shoot major open. I want to shoot open major. Okay. Yeah, you'll know. You won't need people to tell you. And don't and we would not recommend starting there.
No.
And same thing with limited major. I mean, 40 is horrible to shoot in factory configuration. However, you can hand load it into something that's pretty awesome. Unless it falls into my lap for free, which happens occasionally, unless somebody gives me factory 40, I'm not interested in shooting it. But hand loaded 40,
you're just looking at that brass, but like, how do I get you?
Yeah. I'm gonna fire form this brass and make you into something truly spectacular.
That's funny.
What you're going to a USPSA match.
Mm-hmm.
How many rounds of ammo should you bring?
So, like, in most of the places that I've lived, there's weeknight league matches. League matches usually are 3 to 5 stages, and they're usually trying, like, it's everybody gets here after work, so it's like a 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, our local club match, it's it's 60 rounds almost on the dot. Like you could show up with 60 rounds.
Oh, total.
Shoot the whole thing. Now, the rule of thumb, here's one for all you newbies out there. Whatever they say, double it. So even if you know, like I know Winnequa is going to be 58 rounds pretty much on the dot. I am not showing up with less than 100. Probably 200. Because if you get some kind of malfunction, if there's a range a prop malfunction, like one of the activated targets doesn't work, people forgot to reset properly, you get a reshoot. Well, if you only had 60 rounds, but then something out of your control dictates that you need to reshoot, you won't have enough ammo. So always bring twice as much as you think you need.
You don't have to convince me to bring extra.
Yeah, so you can do a league night for about 50 to 100. A weekend club match, those would typically be 5 to 8 stages, depending on your area and your local club, but kind of a weekend day match. I would say 1 to 200 rounds would be reasonable to expect. I would expect to shoot about 150.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a section, area, or nationals level match, I would be expecting to shoot at least 200. I'd be bringing 400 to 500 minimum. Just because worrying about running out of ammo is not stress you need. So unless I really only cut that close when I'm trying to fly with that amount of ammo. If I have room for it in my car, like bring the whole ammo can.
Gotcha. One thing that I've heard, and maybe let me know this, like if a person it's their first match,
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, you know, whoever's in charge of that match will be accommodating and be like, hey, you're not gonna be first up. They'll kind of move you to the back.
Yep. Okay.
And I guess to me that's like, it seems like maybe a minor thing, but if it was my first match, being able to observe a little bit and kind of, you know, watch the program would be like, that would put me at ease.
Yep. So we're a pretty small group, even at the bigger clubs. Like everybody knows everybody, or at least recognizes everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So when you show up, it's kind of like being a freshman. Like you can't hide it. Like we can just smell it on you.
Sure.
All right. So when you go to sign in, well, your first clue will probably be, you'll probably ask somebody where to sign in. But when you go to sign in, they'll probably, you know, either ask you or somehow discern that you're a new shooter. Most clubs will, you know, siphon you off from the group after, you know, in and around the shooters meeting to kind of give you an additional briefing. And this is where they talk about some of the basic rules around cold range and the range commands that they're going to say and kind of how it all works. So a new shooter is going to get that. More often than not. It's not required, but most clubs try to do something like that, you know, because ultimately we want more people in our tribe. So we're always excited when new people come. You will be humbled by how much advice and gear gets thrown your way. Just like, please be our friend and come back. So
well, and then also you said there's some safety component.
Yeah.
Like everybody benefits from safety.
Yep.
And also that person, as that new person, you don't want to make a mistake.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably your biggest
Yeah.
fear is to do something wrong.
Yes.
And so quickly what happens at a match, we get in some of the match format, so there will be stages. There will usually be that number of squads or less if there's less people. So they'll divide out into squads of, we'll say 8 to 20 people to kind of encompass the whole range. It's usually about 10 to 15. So it'll be about 10 to 15 people that is doing this stage at a time. And that's the kind of the group you go around with. Similar to golf, you know, a foursome that you tee off with. In golf, you're going to play the whole thing. And if there's not enough, probably other people are going to join you. You know, if you're 2, there's probably going to be another 2 that play with you. So you're going to be on a squad. And then went a long way to answer your question here. When you're on a squad and you are a new shooter, one of the things they do is they establish a shooting order. Sometimes they just hit the random button, which anyone at the top level drives them nuts. But normally they hit the random button, and then that's the order they're going to go in. And then typically the protocol is whoever goes, because going first is somewhat of a disadvantage because you don't get to see how anybody else is going to do it. So more often than not, one of the rules is once you've gone first, you don't have to go first again until everybody else has gone first. And so once the person leads off the order, essentially they usually skip that person to the bottom. They'll start with the person after them. And so you start recycling down to the bottom. If somehow as a new shooter you are up towards the top of that list, it is an unwritten rule, understood everywhere. You can throw your hand up and be like, hey, I'm a new guy. Can I not go first, please? And unless you are surrounded by a bunch of dicks, they will drop you to the bottom. And you can play that card. I'd say you can reasonably play that card for a year,
Wow.
Hey, like I'd really like to know, unless if you're showing up every week, especially once you start like, okay, you know what's going on. Once we start to know your name, like, dude, no.
Yeah, like once you're in the flow.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, once you're in the flow, but like while you're obviously a training wheels type person, it is perfectly okay to say, hey, I'm new. Could I please not be first? And you'll get away with that for an amount of time and utilize that. Like I'm here to tell you that is culturally acceptable. Go ahead and do that, and no one will think less of you. In fact, we like to know, if those people probably weren't in the new shooter briefing, they didn't know you're a new shooter. They just thought you're some other guy that showed up. It's like, oh, okay, well, you probably get some extra help that way too.
Well, and I would think from a shooter progression perspective, let's say you had a group of, we'll say 5 guys, however the group is.
Yep.
You watch 4 people go ahead of you and do things different ways. You're going to glean things from every different shooter and be like, you know what? I like what that person did. Then you get to apply it immediately.
It turns into monkey see, monkey do very quickly.
Yeah.
And then guys at the upper level will either throw a curveball because they saw something that other people didn't see, or they have skills to do something that makes other people nervous. An example of that would be the classic trap is like being able to shoot a target really up close to it, but if you can see it from the back and shoot it from the back so you don't have to run all the way up there, a master Grand Master move would be to like shoot something from a ways away where most people are running up trying to shoot it up close.
Gotcha.
And a lot of people will start following the goat trail pretty quick, and then all of a sudden you're 3/4 of the way through a squad, some guy shoots it from the back. Everyone's like, what just happened? Like, oh, and then everybody starts like rethinking their stage. But for the most part, it turns into monkey see, monkey do pretty quickly. And if you're sitting on a trick like that, that's one of the things where it's like, okay, well, you kind of don't want anybody to see it. Like if you're on a squad with one of your direct competitors, I wouldn't say there's a whole lot of like concealing information, but like if you weren't directly asked, you're probably not volunteering it up and like, oh man, all of a sudden Tyler saw my cool trick, is he gonna do it? But yes, the reason we allow new shooters not to go first is A, they can see a few other people try to do it first, or if they don't know what to do, they kind of get, oh, this is what everybody else. They could at least do what everybody else is doing and get in a decent, not be too far off the beaten path.
Mm-hmm. I mentioned earlier, like as a person who's new to the sport, you don't want to show up and make a mistake. What are some big mistakes that will get a person disqualified?
So the ironclad things, like from a safety standpoint, the sport work, because it's a 3-dimensional sport, essentially they call it the 180, but essentially there's muzzle safe points. There's places that it's okay to point the gun and not. It generally works on a 180-degree plane because most of the time this happens in a square bay. So if you start to point the gun at an angle that is, if you're facing straight down range, if you're facing, if you break behind the plane of your shoulder, you're pointing the gun up range. If a round were to go off, it would go up range where potentially people are standing. So breaking the 180 is something that'll send you home for sure. Handling a gun outside the safety area or before make ready, that will do it. An accidental discharge, so the gun going off not at a target. I believe there's a 9-foot rule in USPSA. Certainly in 3-gun, that would be if you drew and you like Barney Fifed one right out of the holster. it comes out and bang and hits the ground like right in front of your feet. If a round impacts within I think 9 feet of your toes, that's something like that. But it's primarily 180 breaks and negligent discharges, and then gun handling outside of the area. That's most of them.
What about dropping your gun?
So a dropped gun, it depends if it's loaded or not. So if you're shooting a stage and drop a loaded gun, so if a loaded gun hits the ground, that is grounds for a disqualification. You're expected to maintain control over your gun. So if you drop a loaded gun, that's a DQ. If you're just gallivanting around the range and your empty gun falls out, that's a dropped gun. That's completely different because it's verified. There's protocols in place to verify that was unloaded. A range officer has to come and pick it up for you. So we will publicly shame you, but you aren't DQ'd. It's just, hey, you're an RO. Can you pick up my gun? And then they, so dropping an unloaded gun is not a DQ.
Somebody dropped their gun. I'd like to take it to the owner. If you could just pick that up for me, that'd be great.
Oh, everybody knows when it's not like it fell out and like you're like, oh man, I haven't had my pistol for 10 minutes. No, it's like it falls out and it makes like the loudest clattering noise you've ever heard in your life. And I was like,
it's like when you're in a fancy restaurant and a dish breaks.
Yes, it's just like that. Like it does not go unnoticed.
Man, we've covered everything. Nearly everything.
Everything. I was going to say, I thought you had more yet.
I've got a little bit more, and that, I guess, my last thing, unless you guys have more, because there really is a really cool topic. Maybe just walk us through what a stage is like. Like, what are the targets like? How much movement can there be? What types of targets could a person expect? Steel targets, paper targets, no shoots. You mentioned, hardcover targets, things like that.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there, so we'll keep inventory of that. There's essentially two kinds of paper targets. There's two different shapes, if you will. There's essentially the one that looks like a person, and then there's one that's a torso, but we cut off all the human features of it.
Looks more like a turtle shell.
Yeah, because in other countries, you're not allowed to shoot at people.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So the IPSC target doesn't have a head box. Americans were like, screw that, and we made one with a head box.
Which, curiously, is called a metric.
Yes, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
So you're either going to shoot...
Interesting.
Yeah, you're either going to shoot USPSA or IPSC targets. They all have an alpha, a Charlie, and a delta zone. And then there will be...
alpha being the highest score, and then...
Yep, and then there's a few different types of steel targets that, generally speaking, have to follow the score. There's one that's called a popper. It kind of looks like a tombstone kind of thing.
Yep. Think of like a lollipop with a very large tapered stem.
All I see is Larry from VeggieTales.
I'm unfamiliar.
Oh, well, there you go, if you know. But
if you know, you know.
You're talking about, okay.
Like the asparagus.
Yeah. No, yep.
But yeah, it's basically a big, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's a big, tall board-looking thing, and then it has a 6-inch circle in the middle of it. That's the calibration zone. So there's poppers that when you hit them, they fall over. There's plate racks, so like it will have 6-8-inch plates on it, and those fall over. But a lot of the really wild targets, because this is the more structured version of the sport, a lot of what's called like circus targets aren't allowed, so they're kind of condensed. You'll either see those cardboard targets or some kind of falling steel. Cardboard targets that score are brown because that is the natural color that cardboard is. The white targets are no shoots. Hitting inside the perforation of a white target incurs a penalty. There are black targets, which are called hard covers. Those you don't get any points for hitting them. You don't get any penalty for hitting them. It just counts for nothing. It's akin to hitting a cement wall. So you will see some combination of scoring, no shoot, and hardcover cardboard targets. And then most of those will be full size. You could see half-sized versions of those targets too. sometimes. So it's the same thing, scaled down. They simulate distance, or they just make it a trickier shot. But the targets you'll see will fit into those parameters pretty consistently. And then there are stages. There's essentially speed shoots, or there's short courses, medium courses, and field courses. A short course is one, it would be like, a good example of a short course would be like your classic El Presidente. So turn and 3 targets, each 2 times, reload, each target 2 times. So very basic stuff like that. Medium-sized course would be like, shoot these targets from here, this box, go over 5 feet away, shoot targets from this box. Some amount of movement. And then a field course would be probably what you see the most on YouTube. That's where there are walls, there's bigger areas and stuff like that. The largest a USPSA stage can be is 32 scored shots, essentially. 32 rounds is as big as a USPSA stage can be, which in most of the divisions is 2 mag changes, or 1 mag change, so it's 2 magazines.
Gotcha.
Unless you're shooting the smaller divisions, then you rain equipment everywhere. But
yard selling.
Just a little trail of mags.
Yeah. And like in the IPSC version of the sport, the international version of the sport, there's a ratio. Like I think you need 2 short or medium courses, or 3 short or medium courses to every large course, to kind of balance things out. A lot of the ones that are more popular, more fun to shoot at, and in the American version of the game, for the most part, most of them are field courses, and then they sprinkle in a couple of short courses.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. It's like
that's very club dependent, though.
Yeah, the majority of the matches that I had participated in, it's like, oh, we've got an El Prez today.
Yeah,
interesting.
Most of the stages, if you go to a club match, they're going to be 20 to 32 rounds, and then some variation of the short courses to balance things out.
Yeah.
Also, a sanctioned USPSA match is required to have a classifier stage, so that's a standardized set of stages. It's very specific dimensionally. There's also benchmarks for how that stage has been shot. So when you're asking me about Grand Master stuff, how you perform on those stages is what they use to determine your skill level. That's how you class up. That's a way. That's the primary way you class up and down, is how you perform on those. That's your essentially your rolling average of how you perform on classifiers is how you get ranked, or how you perform at major matches where there's other established competition. So usually it'll be some combination of field courses, at least 1 classifier, because the rules say you got to have one, and people like to, people are competitive. They want to know how they stack up. So actually having classifiers at the matches is pretty popular. Or some matches, especially, it's kind of in vogue around here, like this time of year. So we are just coming out of winter. Everyone's kind of rusty. The weather's kind of crappy. The classifier stages are pretty basic and easy to set up. So a lot of times the first outdoor match of the year around here is a classifier match at our clubs around here. So they'll do entire matches of just short classifier stages. So there's some of those too. And then you get 4 to 6 of these scores, and you can level up on it. So that's another type of match too. If you see a match that's a USPSA classifier match, that's what they mean. All the stages will be established classifiers, and people will be trying to up their classification.
Gotcha. Backing up a little bit, or we're kind of talking about the stage there. Walk me through, it's like, you go from being on deck to you are going to be the shooter that shoots.
Let's back up a step from that. So your squad rolls up to a stage.
Yeah.
First stage of the match, or you finish the stage and you're going to the next one. Generally speaking, people are arriving before the match starts, so people are already looking at the stage. Most of the planning actually happens before the match. When you actually arrive at a stage, there's usually some amount of ungoverned time just for goat roping, because we're herding all the cats together. But to begin, it's required that they read the written stage briefing. So there is a sheet of paper there that has very specific specifications of what it all has to say, but it essentially tells you the round count, the start position, and the stage procedure. So it would be something like, bringing back to this, but it's Comstock, 32 rounds. Start position is, straddling the start stick or toes on marks, handgun loaded and holstered, hands at sides. And then stage of procedure would be upon the audible start signal, engage targets as they're available from within the shooting area. If they vary from that in some way, they have to tell you on there. So they might start with, you might have to start wrists above shoulders. You might have to start facing up range. They do various start positions just to mess with you, essentially. Add some variation. So at some point, that will be read aloud and to the whole squad. And then they have some amount of walkthrough time. Usually it's about 5 minutes. If it's a bigger, not bigger, but if it's like a weekend match, if we're not trying to get out of there before dark on a Tuesday, you have about 5 minutes. All right, so 5 minutes for the whole squad to examine the stage. So everybody's walking through air gunning, i.e. not with their real guns, but with their fingers. They're pew-pewing through their plan and where they're going to shoot this target from, where they're going to reload, all that stuff. You have about 5 minutes. And then they'll start the order. So they'll go back to, in the tablet, the established order that the squad agreed on. They'll call it off. And usually it's something like, so-and-so's up, so-and-so's on deck, so-and-so's in the hole. Sometimes they'll go into the deep hole and read it off from there. But generally speaking, they will be calling off who's up, who's on deck, and who's in the hole. And so whoever's up is expected to kind of be standing at the start position ready to go. Or when they're the first one, it's like, are we ready now? Okay, Ben, get on up here. All right, so that person will be in the start position. And then the RO will say, make ready. And that is the shooter's cue that you can load your pistol. You're allowed to, from the start position, you're allowed to, do a draw. You can look at your sight. You kind of mentally rehearse stuff. You're not allowed to take more than one step away from the start position. But that's where, more often than not, you'll do a draw to whatever the first target is. If you're using an optic, that's where you make sure your optic is on. You like the illumination that it's set at, stuff like that. And then you load it and assume whatever the start position is. So loaded, holstered, hands at sides, or if there's a table, sometimes you do table starts, put it on the table, wherever you want, and you get into the start position. Once you're in the start position, you're probably going to get a, are you ready? That's a question. So that's your time. No, I'm not ready. They have to wait. There's no time for how long you get. So if you'll ask, are you ready? And if you either say yes or you don't say anything, they'll say stand by. And then in 3 to 5 seconds, they will give you the audible start from the beep, from the timer. Usually it's audible. They can do visual. It's very rare. Very rare. Usually it's audible. So stand by. You get the beep. You do all the shooting, whatever it is, for as long as you want. And then when they either assume you're done or it seems like you're done, they'll ask, if you're finished, unload and show clear. So they're asking for control of the range back. So that's where you take the magazine out, you take the round out of the chamber. You're expected to show them that it's empty, and then they'll say, if clear, hammer down. So you're expected to lower the slide, dry fire the gun. So if it was still loaded, it would go off. It rarely ever does, but if it goes off, you're DQ'd. That'd be another one. But if clear, hammer down and holster. So you put it back in your holster, and then they'll call the range clear. Everyone goes up and scores the targets. So the two officials will score the targets. They'll call out whatever's out there. And then as they're getting called, everybody else on the squad has a bunch of stickers or tape. They're essentially putting stickers or tape over your holes so that the target doesn't have any holes in it anymore. They'll stand the steel back up. If it's a real legit USPSA match, they'll paint the steel so it's your bullet mark is not on there anymore. And then the next person, that on deck person, is expected to be standing there ready to go when everybody gets back. That's essentially, and then they'll proceed down the list until everybody goes, and then they'll go to the next stage, and the next stage, and the next stage.
Pro tip, not from a pro. Be a proactive paster of targets.
It is culturally unacceptable to not assist in reset. You will get called out on that. But if you're not ROing, scoring, or the shooter
Or the shooter on deck.
The on-deck shooter, and for the most part, the shooter that like just shot before this guy. Those guys all have kind of a pass on resetting. Everybody else is expected to participate in reset, and it's actually unsportsmanlike conduct if you don't. So like it's something they can actually penalize you for if you don't.
If you are a new shooter,
Mm-hmm.
like should you be apprehensive about jumping in and helping out, or just ask?
Nope. Well, I'll hand you a string of the stickers, and they'll explain it to you. So like, hey, wait until the RO, range officer, until he walks by and calls off whatever it is. But he'll walk by a string of targets, 2 Alpha, Alpha Charlie, Alpha Delta, 2 Alpha, 2 Alpha, 2 Alpha. Once they walk by it and they call it out, it's fair game to get reset. So the only thing for a new person to be aware of is like, how are they scoring? Don't reset the side of the stage they haven't scored yet. But once you figure out the pattern that they're scoring it in, once it's scored, it's fair game to reset. If it's a piece of steel, stand it back up and paint it. You know, that kind of stuff. It's like listening to it on a podcast seems more intimidating than it is, but it's pretty straightforward.
I like it. Ryan, anything to add?
I want to answer the question as to why to shoot USPSA. And
Yeah.
I think, number one, become a Jedi with your pistol is a huge reason. I think a lot of folks purchase a handgun for whatever reason that they purchase a handgun for. And having been also in firearm sales, I saw a lot of those handguns get purchased and then years later sold back to me with perhaps one magazine of ammunition run through it.
Like new condition.
Yeah. And so I think it's a really good way that you can become very well versed in your equipment, and then yourself as a person, your own abilities with that equipment. Two, it's really good and fun time. Like it is a hoot to do. I've heard a lot of people say that, USPSA, especially a bunch of snuffy folks, spend a lot of time shooting at local matches. Never shot a big match, but local matches, and made some of my best friends out of those.
You could meet an Adam.
That's correct. And you get a network of people that help develop you as a shooter and introduce you to new and fascinating things. And really, it is a fantastic way to, like I said, exercise your equipment, exercise your ability, and not be just a regular gun owner. Like it's taking it to a very interesting, engaging new level of doing things. And I think it's a riot. So
if you've invested in high performance firearms, this is the place to set your motorcycle free.
Yeah.
All right. You bought a sweet gun. This is the place to like set it loose and see what it does.
And don't be afraid of not being an alpha class shooter. Was pretty apparent to me right away after probably like my 4th or 5th formal shooting match. I was not going to be the guy who was putting GM next to my name. I knew I was going to have a U next to my name for unclassified. Just because, again, that was my personal interest level. Like I wasn't like, yeah, I'm going to go around all the area matches to the classifier matches, that kind of thing. I just wasn't going to do it. Enjoyed doing it, no less. Like I enjoyed shooting that. And this, like Adam said, this was the way to set that motorcycle free. What I really loved about our local club back home in Minnesota, where Adam and I are from, and then also when I shot it a bit here in Wisconsin, there were some old boys on that club, or in our squads at the club, that they couldn't run the stage. Like they could barely walk it.
They physically run.
Yeah. And like to go shoot that level of match in their late 70s to even early 80s. Like I've shot USPSA with guys in their 80s.
That's so cool.
Just to be mobile and to be out with the gun, having fun, phenomenal. It's a lifelong sport. This is not like football or baseball or marathon running, which are all great. This is something that you can shoot as long as you can move. Even mobility impaired people shoot USPSA matches.
That's super cool.
And it's a kind of a context that you can't get any other way. Like even here at our facility, people who have access to our range, access to all the props, generally speaking, they don't set up something as
dynamic
and interesting as a USPSA, because it's a lot of work.
Yep.
So here, this is kind of the community collective benefiting. Like this community put together these interesting stages. We all shoot them together, and it's probably the most interesting context you can shoot a pistol in.
Yep.
But you also have, various people throughout. I mean, there's that 5% that are at the top, they're here to win. There's people who kind of accept that they're in to a certain extent. Like there's most people just aren't going to dry fire every day, but they still enjoy the sport. So there's people who don't practice at all between matches, but they're there every week, And so those people kind of like, a lot of times they'll pick out a benchmark like, oh yeah, I'm usually around Ryan. Like I just want to beat Ryan this week, and there's the match within the match, and they kind of benchmark themselves. And some of those people benchmark themselves to all of a sudden they're at the top of the list. And then there's other people, they just, they're doing it to practice their skills. Law enforcement people, concealed carry people, end of times people. They just want reps on the gun. They're there doing their thing. Nobody cares. And then there's the resident old guys that they're just glad to be out. A lot of times it's people's group of friends away from their family or whatever. This is their bowling league. This is their pool, whatever it is, it's just the thing that they do, and everybody knows everybody. So yeah, I think it's a lot of things to a lot of people. It's not a super competitive sport to a ton of people, but don't be mistaken. There's that 5% that take it seriously as an athletic sport, and to them, like the guns maybe even aren't as interesting anymore. They want to play the game at the high level. It's to me, it's riding the lightning, and if anything short of that or working on that is just kind of lost it for me. It's essentially once you get, if you chase it to that level, it kind of turns into chasing the dragon. Like you're chasing that rush to get there. But that's not the only reason to play. It's the place to shoot pistols that way that you can't really do anywhere else.
We should have the Cheers theme song playing.
Yeah.
Where everybody knows.
Or like, out there in Instagram land, entertainment now is kind of the thing. Like, go get training, go get training. Well, guess what? If you take 3 or 4 tactical pistol classes, even from different instructors, guess what? It's just shooting a pistol. Like at some point you don't need the class anymore. Some instructors have even said they get to the point where the people are like, well, I don't really need the class. I just want to shoot. Okay, well, if you're in the class in the category of like, well, yeah, I get it. I just want to shoot and exercise my skills.
Yep.
The match is where you go to exercise some skills. If you don't necessarily need how to manipulate a double feed malfunction anymore. Not saying that's a bad skill, but if you're like, well, I just want to shoot, this is the place to go and shoot.
Well, and yeah, it's a very dynamic way to do it, and we started with why should you shoot a USPSA match, and the cool thing that's really come to light for me as we've talked through the matches themselves is you could be an Adam, or someday you might be an Adam, but you also never have to aspire. Like we talked about, the matches, they're fun, they're dynamic, there's camaraderie component, the rules are the same, so you have this framework that's static, but why you should do it can be and should be entirely up to you and your goals and what you're trying to get out of it. So I guess where I'm going with that is you don't have to have like the pressure, well, I'm never going to be a Grand Master. If you don't care, that doesn't matter. Show up to the match.
All the more fun.
Yeah.
Right.
And if you want to be a Grandmaster, you absolutely can. I mean, I was picked last for every sport I ever played. All right. Like, I am not athletically gifted. All right. I've fought for every ounce of skill I have. And I think everybody beyond A class has the same technical skills. Once you're A class, you have all the technical skills. From there, it is a mental game and a consistency game. So being able to play the game, have the mindset, and execute is where you go master Grandmaster. You don't need superhuman skill to do it. The Grandmaster isn't for people that are special. Some of them are. Some of them are really special. But, like, you can do it if you apply yourself to it. But that's a choice. You don't have to. If you want to, you absolutely can. And if you don't want to, it's a pretty fun game to play. So,
I mean, I can tell you, like I said, I've never done it, but going into it, my goal would be like I would do carry optics, and my goal would be to either just to get a little bit better every time I went, like get incrementally better. And if I got to a spot where I felt like I had at least, maybe plateaued, at least maintain that.
Yep. I mean, people start, they're like, goals start at, shooting the match safely. And then
exactly.
And then it gets to, having a stage plan, executing a stage plan, executing a stage plan. Then shooting the match without penalties. No misses, no shoots, And then you can get to shooting without errors, So you got it, you hit everything, and you did everything you set out to do. I mean, so it has progressive levels as well. It doesn't have to be at the scorecard at the end of the day.
Sure.
And then sometimes, like, this is kind of how some of it starts is people, they pick a gun like you did. So you picked a carry optics gun, and say you went all the way. Say you got Grand Master with a carry optics gun. Well, you're not done shooting. Now what?
Revolver.
Well, so that's one of the things that I fell in love with the process along the way. So I got it in limited optics. What's the first thing I did? Changed guns and did it again, and then I changed guns and did it again. Right? Actually, I broke my leg the next week, but once I could walk again, then I changed guns and did it again. Did it in limited. Okay, well, limited. What's another challenge? Well, I went to a reduced capacity gun, and what am I doing now?
Doing it again.
Changing guns, doing it again.
Adam, you were making a motorcycle analogy earlier on. How did you break your leg?
I was training for an enduro race in the woods. I was done. I was on my way back to the parking lot, and I wasn't squeezing tight enough with my legs when I tried to wheelie over something, and my foot slipped off.
This was on a motorcycle?
Yeah, on a dirt bike. And so my foot slipped off and caught the ground, so that twisted my knee in a direction it's not supposed to go.
Yeah.
And I dislocated my knee and fractured my tibial plateau.
Yuck.
In the woods. So extracted myself with a dislocated leg 2 miles, waited for my cousin and my dad to show up to bring me to the hospital. And that was Memorial Day weekend last year.
Did you ride out?
Yeah, I rode out.
Oh, man.
That was gnarly. I don't have to make up that part of the story. That was gnarly. But yeah, got a 6-inch plate, 9 screws, 40 stitches, 18 weeks on the couch.
He sent me a picture. I said, that is the most spectacular fracture I've ever seen in my life.
That's what all of the doctors said too.
It was fantastic.
Did you post some of that on Instagram?
A little bit.
I think I remember thinking to myself, oh man, sometimes on these they'll gray it out, and then you have the option to click if you want to see it.
Oh, I didn't post anything gross. No, I posted some of my X-rays though.
Maybe that was enough. I don't know.
I'll send MC Ryan my X-rays if he wants to post them. He can post them.
I was mostly positive you were getting a full knee replacement on that one.
That was.
But
it was the highs of high. Like I literally the week before, I pegged Grand Master. I'd been chasing it for months. Finally did it, put it over the top, and it had this huge weight. And one of the things, the only reason it's even worth telling the story, one of the things I was worried about, because you have to maintain, you can't just do it and then you get it. Like, you have to maintain that level of skill for some amount of time until your rolling average is over 95%.
Gotcha.
One of the things I was worried about is just like, what if life happens? What if I get in a car accident? What if I get too busy with work and I can't train at this level? What if I have to back off on dry fire or whatever? Like, what if something? And one of the things that was in my head is, well, what if I get hit by a bus? And the next week, broken leg on the couch. And I think if I hadn't done it the week before, I would have been laying in the hospital wondering, like, man, will I ever? Like, it's gone forever. But the inverse was true. I was laying in the hospital, was like, I know what to do and how to do it, and I can do it again. And that was one of the things that got me all the way through rehab and everything. I went to my PT doctor, well, even my surgeon. And if you see me in real life, like, I am not the epitome of physical fitness. All right, but I'm working on it. But like, I went there, and they see a million people. I told this gal point blank, I'm like, I'm a professional athlete trying to return to my sport. In so many words. You could just see in her mind, she threw out like whatever she was going to tell me, and she like opened the drawer and picked up like another plan, and like, well, if you do it, this is what we're doing.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, and it was. We're almost a year away from that. I say I'm 98, 99% of what I was, and that is not the norm for that injury. Most people, they get back to walking again kind of with a limp, and that was it. But I mean, that was my incentive to do what those people said and to push through all the PT stuff, was because I wasn't done shooting, and I wasn't done shooting at a high level. So the agility is something you really got to work on. I got to work on now, because I don't consider myself gifted at that before, and had to get it all back. Yeah, it was
That's
definitely
huge,
a ride.
Well, no, I think that just shows the general importance of having whatever the activity is, something that you're passionate about, and that was that thing out there that gave you the drive to to do the PT and heal up and get, what I mean? Because
that's what
it's like, you might, even though your health is like the most important thing, but it can be difficult when you don't have that thing hanging out there that you want to get back to.
Yeah, just kind of the enlightening, because I read a lot of books and stuff, and philosophy stuff, and that was one of the sad things for me, even talking to them, like, well, I mean, I don't think I'm doing good. I don't think it was hard. I'm just doing, and they're like, no, you're way better than most of the people. I'm like, so, like, what percentage of the people who come through here don't do what you say? 80%? 90%? Like, what? I'm like, yeah, they just kind of reside to, well, it aches when it rains and it doesn't work like it used to. And I'm like, but all they had to do was these silly little rubber band exercises that you gave me, and they could have it all back? Yep, that's all they had to do. I'm like, man, it's just like how easily people would accept mediocrity, instead of, it'll never feel the same. I mean, it will never be the same, but there's nothing I can't do today that I couldn't do back then.
Still ride dirt bikes?
Yeah. I mean, not yet, but that's only because of weather. I mean, I will.
That's true.
I will.
I will.
Still got them in the garage. They're ready to go.
All right. Well, thank you guys, and thanks everybody for listening. Man, covered a lot of ground here, and I think the most important thing we covered was why you should shoot a USPSA match.
Shoot a match.
Get out and shoot some guns. If not, you're just gonna shoot some bullseye on a piece of paper, and it's gonna be boring.
There you go.
Like,
don't be bored.
Shoot 20,000 rounds. Give yourself a reason.
Yeah.
I like it. All right. Thank you guys. Thanks everybody for listening. Like we said, shoot a match. Shoot a USPSA match. Find one in your area. Lots of ways to do that. Actually, I was closing out. Adam, what's a good way to find a match in your area?
Go to USPSA.org or PractiScore, as in practical score, PractiScore.com. PractiScore is the scoring software that the entire sport uses, and so they list all the matches, and so you can type in USPSA Indiana, and it will show you what's in your area, and that's also where you sign up. So just throw your name on there, sign up. It'll tell you where to go, show up. And let people know that you're new and you want to get into it. Believe me, you will get more advice and welcoming than you could possibly imagine. I mean, everybody there wants you to participate and wants you to succeed. Well, maybe 99%, but everybody wants you to be a part of their group and help you succeed. And you will receive more unsolicited advice than you'll know what to do with. So just go find a match and show up. That's all you got to do.
There you go.
The rest of it takes care of itself.
Find a match, show up. Maybe you'll see Adam.
Maybe.
Or Ryan. You seemed pretty excited earlier.
Every year.
Ryan's a pleaser, so if you ask him like enough times, eventually he'll have to for the people.
10 asks, and you'll see Ryan at your match.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.